previous government, with the Prime Minister of that government and the Foreign Minister, the two had been rapidly approaching Bhutan on the border issue, and there was this very serious fear in India that this government, the previous Bhutan government, might sign a package deal which would include Doklam, and as part of the package deal, the Chinese would get Doklam Plateau and some territory in the north would be returned to Bhutan. So Doklam being awarded to PLA, China, rang alarm bells in India. No leaders of India's neighborhood visit India like this. The king was testing the waters to see whether and to what extent the government of India would accommodate Chinese desire.
In recent years, the Kingdom of Bhutan has seen a remarkable uptick in royal visits to India, with King Jigme Khesar Namgyel Wangchuck making at least 3 trips between 2023 and 2024 alone. Earlier in 2024, PM Modi had also visited Bhutan and was moved by the king's special gesture to see him off at the airport. And when a small Himalayan kingdom grabs headlines for frequent royal visits to its powerful southern neighbor, the world takes notice. But what lies behind the surge in diplomatic activity? Well, at the heart of this diplomatic dance are border disputes with China.
Very serious fear in India that this government, the previous Bhutan government, might sign a package deal which would include Doklam, and as part of the package deal, the Chinese would get Doklam Plateau and some territory in the north would be returned to Bhutan. So Doklam being awarded to PLA, China, rang alarm bells in India, and therefore India, to put it mildly, I think summoned the king, and I do believe that the king, Khesar Namgyel Wangchuck, could not have been not in the loop what his prime minister and his foreign minister were up to. And there has always been an understanding between India and Bhutan. India and Bhutan have a treaty of peace and perpetual friendship, which was originally signed in 1949 and then renegotiated at the request of Bhutan. And in 2007, where Pranab Mukherjee and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh were directly involved in renegotiating the treaty. One important clause of this treaty is Article 2. And Article 2 of the treaty says that in case there is any threat to security of either country, suitable action, military action, would be taken to counter that. Words to that effect. I'm not. These are not the exact quotes of the treaty, and therefore you will recall that in 2017, when the PLA, the Chinese PLA, attempted to build a road in the Chumbi Valley, which is that narrow dagger which comes in from Tibet into the Siliguri corridor, that's the Chumbi corridor, and Doklam is plunk in the middle of it. And in 2017, the Doklam confrontation took place because the PLA, in violation of the agreements with India and Bhutan, that no further action on Doklam would take place till the trijunction between India, Bhutan, and China was reaffirmed.
Bhutan shares over a 470-kilometer long border with China, a relationship fraught with tension and unresolved territorial claims. The historical context is critical. For decades, Bhutan has navigated its position carefully, balancing its ties with India against the rising assertiveness of China. Under the former regime, Bhutan exhibited diplomatic friendliness towards China, engaging in negotiations that raised eyebrows in New Delhi. The story begins in January 2023, when Bhutan's then Prime Minister Lotay Tshering signed a three-step roadmap with China to resolve their decades-long border disputes. The plan included talks about Doklam, the strategic plateau at the India-China-Bhutan tri-junction. For India, Doklam is more than a border issue. It's a matter of national security. In 2017, India intervened there to halt Chinese road construction that threatened its critical Siliguri corridor, also known as the Chicken's Neck, a 22-kilometer stretch, the lifeline connecting India to its northeastern states. The Doklam package deal, part of the roadmap, would have potentially allowed China to push its claims in the strategically critical Chumbi Valley, right on India's doorstep.
The Chinese were attempting to bypass that agreement and unilaterally build this road, which would have come up to a place called the Jamferi Ridge. The Jamferi Ridge is a critical ridge running across the Chumbi corridor at its narrowest point. And if the Chinese succeeded in crossing the Torsa Nadi and getting on to Jamferi Ridge, it would overlook the Siliguri corridor or the Chicken's Neck. And therefore, the Doklam confrontation was undertaken by India, the Indian Army, by invoking that Article 2 of the 2007 treaty with Bhutan, and we prevented that from happening. That with the situation in Bangladesh going completely askew, there is a double jeopardy that the Chinese and the Bangladeshis, the new Bangladesh regime, who are who have been very good friends in the past and are better friends today, with this nexus between Pakistan, Bangladesh, and China.
Tensions escalated in March 2023 when Tshering told a Belgian newspaper that Bhutan and China were close to resolving their differences. New Delhi saw this as a red flag. Historically, Bhutan has always consulted India before engaging with China, especially on Doklam. Suddenly, that tradition seemed to be shifting.
There has always been an understanding between India and Bhutan that before Bhutan went for any negotiation with the Chinese, and their border talks had begun in 1985, and they are on the 25th or 26th round of talks. That before they went to for the talks, they would consult India. I know this. And these consultations would take place when the Bhutanese delegation returned. It would brief the Indians that look, this is what happened, and etc. Now, the that last regime, the last government started saying that look, this is a matter between Bhutan and China, and this is a bilateral matter. Although India is involved because of the tri-junction, but it's a bilateral matter, suggesting that they could do these talks now, meaning the last regime, without either consultation or informing the government of India. Now, on this, whether the government of India is being informed, I do not know. But I certainly know what was happening in the past. And therefore, this shift in Bhutanese policy of delinking the border dispute with China from that of India was something new and again very disturbing.
Bhutan's relationship with China was indeed growing under sharing government. In October 2023, Bhutan's foreign minister became the first in history to visit Beijing, signing agreements and endorsing the One China policy. Talks with China accelerated, with both nations reportedly nearing a solution. India responded swiftly.
The Bhutanese government have not, in the last year, especially the previous regime, when the foreign minister Tandi Dorji and the prime minister had one had given an interview to a Spanish newspaper saying that this deal was going to happen in a few months, and the foreign minister landed up in Beijing. Uh, the foreign minister landed up in Beijing in October of 2023. The interview by the Prime Minister was given in April 2023 in Brussels. So, a combination of these two factors really set the alarm bells in India. And the king took an air dash and flew into Delhi first in April, then in November, after the foreign minister had landed in Beijing and signed this joint working group, the third meeting. And the third visit, of course, took place now in December, which was an official visit. So, in these 20 months between the April of 2023 and the December of 2024, the king has visited thrice.
King Wangchuck made an unscheduled visit to New Delhi, where Prime Minister Modi reportedly made India's concerns crystal clear. Any Bhutan-China border agreement would have strategic implications for India. The king returned again later that year, under the pretext of promoting Bhutan's Jelefu Smart City project. But the real agenda? Calming India's nerves over Bhutan's warming ties with China. King Wangchuck's visits are thus seen as crucial for reinforcing mutual trust and cooperation amid these delicate geopolitical dynamics. The November 2023 elections in Bhutan marked the turning point. Shering's party lost power, and the new government under Prime Minister Shering Torbay has been silent on the China roadmap.
The previous government, having done what it was trying to do without the knowledge of the king, is not possible. Now, having said that, I I believe that the king was testing the waters. The king was testing the waters to see whether and to what extent the government of India would accommodate Chinese desire to have this to settle the border with Bhutan, with China. We know that only two countries today are left which have disputed borders with China. One is India and the other is Bhutan. All other countries, from 14 or 15 countries, have sorted out their borders.
The shift may have eased tensions with India, but it hasn't erased them. Bhutan faces internal challenges too. Its economy, heavily reliant on India, struggles with rising unemployment and an exodus of its youth. The king's ambitious Jellifu Special Economic Zone aims to bring hope, a new city on the India-Bhutan border, powered by international aid and Indian support. As King Wangchuck made yet another visit to India in December 2024, one thing is clear. Bhutan is walking a diplomatic tightrope between its two powerful neighbors. From making frequent stops to India to attending former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's funeral late December, for now the king's assurances seem to hold. But the region's future will depend on the delicate balance between Bhutan's aspirations, China's ambitions, and India's security concerns.
Bhutanese government and the king, he's a very wise man. He has studied at the National Defense College in Delhi, and he's one of the only monarchs who has studied in the Indian National Defense College. And so he understands India, he understands the security concerns of India. But he has a government, an elected government, to also take care of. They are a democracy, which is, I think, largely guided by the king himself. But there is an elected government, which, in the case of the previous regime, was perhaps marching out of tune with India's security concerns.